We are back to reading Think and Grow Rich. Currently in the chapter Thoughts Are Things, which is still chapter 1. We've only just started. The last subheading we read was titled 3 Feet from Gold. And it was a story about when someone quits having been overtaken by temporary defeat. The person in this case was a character called Mr. Darby. And if we'll remember, Mr. Darby gave up 3 feet from gold. Oh, and that's what the subchapter was called. Yeah, so I hope you remember. He was mining, thought the gold stopped mining, gave away all the mining equipment, and then 3 more feet later there was more gold than he'd dug up in the previous thing. This next subchapter is called I Will Never Stop Because Men Say No. Long afterward, Mr. Darby recouped his loss many times over when he made the discovery that desire can be transmuted into gold. The discovery came after he went into the business of selling life insurance. Remembering he had lost a huge fortune because he stopped 3 feet from gold, Darby profited by the experience in his chosen work by the simple method of saying to himself, I stopped 3 feet from gold, but I will never stop because men say no when I ask them to buy insurance. Darby became one of a small group of men who sell over $1 million in life insurance annually. He owed his stickability to the lesson he learned from his quitability in the gold mining business. Before success comes in anyone's life, they are sure to meet with much temporary defeat, and perhaps much failure. But when defeat overtakes us, the easiest and most logical thing to do is to quit. And that is exactly what the majority of people do. More than 500 of the most successful people this country has ever known, talking about the US here, I suppose, told the author their greatest success came just one step beyond the point at which defeat had overtaken them. Let me read that again. The most successful people of this country told the author that their greatest success came just one step beyond the point at which defeat had overtaken them. Failure is a trickster with a keen sense of irony and cunning. It takes great delight in tripping one when success is almost within reach. I like that. Next subheading, a 50-cent lesson in persistence. Shortly after, Mr. Darby received his degree from the University of Hard Knocks and had decided to profit by his experience in the gold mining business. He had the good fortune to be present on an occasion that proved to him that no does not necessarily mean no. One afternoon he was helping his uncle grind wheat in an old-fashioned mill. The uncle operated a large farm on which a number of coloured sharecrop farmers lived. Oh, okay, this is a pretty old book. I think it's like the 50s just came out. Let's have a quick look. (1960). The uncle operated a large farm on which a number of coloured sharecrop farmers lived. Quietly, the door was opened and a small coloured girl, the daughter of a tenant, walked in and took her place near the door. The uncle looked up, saw the child, and barked at her roughly, "What do you want?" Meekly, the child replied, "My mammy say send her 50 cents. "I'll not do it," the uncle retorted. "Now you run on home." "Yes, sir," the child replied, but she did not move. The uncle went ahead with his work, so busily engaged that he did not pay enough attention to the child to observe that she did not leave. When he looked up and saw her still standing there, he yelled at her, "I told you to go home. Now go, or I'll take a switch to you." Switch, like a stick for hitting. The little girl said, "Yes, sir," but she did not budge. The uncle dropped a sack of grain he was about to pour into the mill hopper, picked up a barrel stave, and started towards the child with an expression on his face that indicated trouble. Darby held his breath. He was certain he was about to witness an assault. He knew his uncle had a fierce temper. When the uncle reached the spot the child was standing, she quickly stepped forward one step, looked up into his eyes, and screamed at the top of her shrill voice, "My mammy's gotta have that 50 cents. The uncle stopped, looked at her for a minute, and then slowly laid the barrel stave on the floor, put his hand in his pocket, took out $50 and gave it to her. The child took the money and slowly backed toward the door, never taking her eyes off the man whom she had just conquered. After she had gone, the uncle sat down on a box and looked out the window into space for more than 10 minutes. He was pondering with awe over the whipping he had just taken. Mr. Darby, too, was doing some thinking. That was the first time in all his experience that he had seen a coloured child deliberately master an adult white person. How did she do it? What happened to his uncle that caused him to lose his fierceness and become as docile as a lamb? What strange power did this child use that made her master of the situation? These and other similar questions flashed into Darby's mind, but he did not find the answer until years later when he told me the story. Strangely, the story of this unusual experience was told to the author in the old mill, on the very spot where the uncle took his whipping. Next subheading is called The Strange Power of a Child. As we stood there in that musty old mill, Mr. Darby repeated the story of the unusual conquest and finished by asking, "What can you make of it? What strange power did that child use so completely that whipped my uncle?" The answer to his question will be found in the principles described in this book. The answer is full and complete. It contains details and instructions sufficient to enable anyone to understand and apply the same force with which the little child accidentally stumbled upon. Keep your mind alert and you will observe exactly what strange power came to the rescue of the child. You will catch a glimpse of this power in the next chapter. Somewhere in the book, you will find an idea that will quicken your receptive powers and place at your command for your own benefit this same irresistible power. The awareness of this power may come to you in the first chapter, or it may flash into your mind in some subsequent chapter. It may come in the form of a single idea, or it may come in the nature of a plan or purpose. Again, it may cause you to go back into your past experiences of failure or defeat and bring to the surface some lesson by which you can regain all that you lost through your previous defeat. After I had described to Mr. Darby the power unwittingly used by the little coloured girl, he quickly retraced his 30 years of experience as a life insurance salesman and frankly acknowledged that his success in that field was due in no small degree to the lesson he had learned from the small child. Mr. Darby pointed out, every time a prospect tried to bow me out without buying, I saw that child standing there in the old mill, her big eyes glaring in defiance, and I said to myself, I've got to make this sale. The better portion of all sales I have made were made after people had said no. He recalled too his mistake in having stopped only 3 feet from gold, but, he said, that experience was a blessing in disguise. It taught me to keep on keeping on, no matter how hard the going may be, a lesson I needed to learn before I could succeed in anything. The experience of stopping 3 feet from gold and missing out from all those riches was a blessing in disguise, teaching him to keep on keeping on no matter how hard the the going may be. A lesson I needed to learn before I could succeed in anything. Before I could succeed in anything, I needed to learn the lesson to keep on keeping on no matter how hard the going may be. Well, that's something. That's definitely something. This story of Mr. Darby and his uncle, the child and the gold mine, doubtless will be read by hundreds of those who make their living by selling life insurance, and to all of those the author wishes to offer the suggestion that Darby owes to these two experiences his ability to sell more than $1 million worth of insurance each year. Mr. Darby's experiences were commonplace and simple enough, yet they held the answer to his destiny in life. Therefore, they were as important to him as life itself. He profited by these two dramatic experiences because he analyzed them and found the lesson they taught. But what of one who has neither the time nor the inclination to study such failure in search of knowledge that may lead to success? Where and how are they to learn the art of converting defeat into stepping stones of opportunity? In answers to these questions, this book was written. Next subchapter is called One Sound is All You Need. The answer called for a description of 13 principles. But remember, as you read, the answer you may be seeking to the questions which have caused you to ponder over the strangeness of life may be found in your own mind through some idea, plan, or purpose which may spring into your mind as you read, or as you listen in this case. One sound idea is all that one needs to achieve success. The principles described in this book contain ways and means of creating useful ideas. Before we go any further in our approach to the description of these principles, we believe you are entitled to receive this important suggestion. We believe you are entitled. Lucky us. When riches begin to come, they come so quickly in such great abundance that one wonders where they have been hiding during all those lean years. That whole sentence is in italics. There hasn't been a sentence completely in italics like that yet, so it must be important. Let me read it again. So before we go any further in our approach to the description of these principles of creating successful ideas, we believe you are entitled to receive this important suggestion. When riches begin to come, they come so quickly and in such great abundance that one wonders where they have been hiding during all those lean years. This is an astounding statement. Yes, it is. And all the more so when we take into consideration the popular belief that riches come only to those who work hard and long. When you begin to think and grow rich, you will observe that riches begin with a state of mind, with definiteness of purpose, with little or no hard work. You and every other person ought to be interested in knowing how to acquire that state of mind which will attract riches. I spent 25 years in research because I too wanted to know how wealthy men became that way. Observe very closely. As soon as you master the principles of this philosophy and begin to follow the instructions for applying those principles, shout out house built on the rock instead of house built on the sand. You must hear the instructions and then apply those principles. It's the application of the principles we learn, not just the knowing about them. So observe very closely and begin to follow the instructions for applying the principles, that your financial status will begin to improve and everything you touch will begin to transmute itself into an asset for your benefit. Impossible? Not at all. I'd like to put a little caveat here. Just be wary when you start putting perceiving things just in terms of your benefit. Because it kind of it just solidifies your separate self, which is a dangerous game to play. One of the main weaknesses of mankind is the average man's familiarity with the word impossible. Very interesting. Ooh, yeah, that is interesting. That creates that reality. That word cements that reality that things could possibly be impossible. It's a weakness to have that word in our vocabulary. We know all the rules which will not work, and we know all the things which cannot be done. This book was written for those who seek the rules which have made others successful and are willing to stake everything on those rules. Success comes to those who become success conscious. Failure comes to those who indifferently allow themselves to become failure conscious. The object of this book is to help all who seek it to learn the art of changing their minds from failure consciousness to success consciousness. Another weakness found in altogether too many people is the habit of measuring everything and everyone by their own impressions and beliefs. Okay. Some persons who read this will believe that they cannot think and grow rich because their thought habits have been steeped in poverty, want, misery, failure, and defeat. These unfortunate people remind me of a prominent Chinese. These unfortunate people reminded me of a prominent Chinese who came to America to be educated in American ways. He attended the University of Chicago. Oh, they were just talking about a single person. I thought we were talking about a wave of Chinese people. Just a single prominent Chinese. You can see the age of this book a little bit. Some of these sentences. He attended the University of Chicago, and one day the President Harper met this young Oriental on the campus, stopped to chat with him for a few minutes, and asked what had impressed him as being the most noticeable characteristic of the American people. "Why," the student exclaimed, "the queer slant of your eyes. Your eyes are off slant." "But what do we say about the Chinese? We refuse to believe that which we do not understand. We foolishly believe that our own limitations are the proper measure of limitations. Sure, the other fellow's eyes are off slant, because they are not the same as our own." That's interesting. Next subchapter. The impossible Ford V8 motor. When Henry Ford decided to produce his famous V8 motor, he chose to build an engine with the entire 8 cylinders cast in one block, and instrumented his engineers to produce a design for the engine. The design was placed on paper, but the engineers agreed to a man that it was simply impossible to cast an 8-cylinder engine block in one piece. Ford said, "Produce it anyway." "But," they replied, "it's impossible." "Go ahead," Ford commanded, "and stand the job until you succeed, no matter how much time is required." The engineers went ahead. There was nothing else for them to do if they were to remain on the Ford staff. 6 months went by and nothing happened. Another 6 months passed and still nothing happened. The engineers tried every conceivable plan to carry out the orders, but the thing seemed out of the question. Impossible. At the end of the year, Ford checked with his engineers, and again they informed him they had found no way to carry out his orders. "Go right ahead," said Ford. "I want it and I'll have it." They went ahead, and then, as if by a stroke of magic, the secret was discovered. The Ford determination had won once more. The story may not be described with minute accuracy, but the sum and substance of it is correct. Deduce from it, you who want to think and grow rich, the secret of the Ford millions, if you can. You'll not have to look very far. Determination. Keeping on. Henry Ford was a success because he understood and applied the principles of success. One of these is desire, knowing what one wants. Remember this Ford story as you read and pick out the lines in which the secret of his stupendous achievement might have been described. If you can do this, remember this story as you read and pick out the lines in which the secret have been described. If you can do this, if you can lay your finger on the particular group of principles which made Henry Ford rich, then you can equal his achievements in almost any calling for which you are suited. Well, let's go ahead and lay our finger on the word determination, because that's surely part of it. Next subchapter, why you are the master of your fate. When Henley wrote the prophetic lines, "I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul," he should have informed us that we are the masters of our fate, the captains of our souls, because we have the power to control our thoughts. He should have told us that our brains become magnetized with the dominating thoughts with which we hold in our minds, and by means with which no man is familiar, these magnets attract to us the forces, the people, the circumstances of life, which harmonize with the nature of our dominating thoughts. I'm going to read that again, because that's very important. Sorry, the door was banging. It was annoying me. We are the captains of our souls because we have the power to control our thoughts, apparently. He should have told us our brains become magnetized, Henley, but we should know that our brains become magnetized with the dominating thoughts with which we hold in our minds, and by means with which no one is familiar, that we cannot know, these magnets attract to us the forces, the people, and the circumstances of life which harmonize with the nature of our dominating thoughts. Oof, alright. That's something to really take to heart. Henley should have told us that before we can accumulate riches in great abundance, we must magnetize our minds with intense desire for riches, that we must become money conscious until the desire for money drives us to create definite plans for acquiring it. One of the difficult things I found reading this book was it does get very specific on getting money, and I just want to remind you that you can set this goal as anything. It doesn't have to be getting money. But that's the terminology of the book, which I will read as it's written. By being a poet and not a philosopher, Henley contented himself by stating a great truth in poetic form, leaving those who followed him to interpret the philosophical meaning of his lines. Little by little, the truth has unfolded itself, until it now appears certain that the principles described in this book hold the secret of mastery over our fate. Principles that can change your destiny. We are now ready to examine the first of these principles. Maintain a spirit of open-mindedness, and remember, as you read, they are the invention of no one man. The principles have worked for many. You can put them to work for your own enduring benefit. You will find it easy, not hard, to do so. Some years ago, I delivered the commencement address at Salem College, Salem, West Virginia. I emphasized the principle described in this next chapter with so much intensity that one of the members of the graduating class definitely appropriated it and made it a part of their own philosophy. The young man became a congressman and an important factor in Franklin D. Roosevelt's administration. He wrote me a letter in which he so clearly stated his opinion on the principle outlined in the next chapter that I've chosen to publish this letter as an introduction to that chapter. It gives you an idea of the rewards to come. My dear Napoleon, my service as a Congress member, having given me an insight into the problems of men and women, I am writing to offer a suggestion which may become helpful to thousands of worthy people. In 1922, you delivered the commencement address at Salem College when I was a member of the graduating class. In that address, you planted in my mind an idea which has been responsible for the opportunity I now have to serve the very people of my state, and will be responsible in a very large measure for what success I may have in the future. I recall as though it were yesterday the marvelous description you gave of the method by which Henry Ford, with but little schooling, without a dollar and with no influential friends, rose to great heights. I made my mind up then, even before you had finished your speech, that I would make a place for myself no matter how many difficulties I had to surmount. Thousands of young people finish their schooling this year and within the next few years, and every one of them will be seeking just as such a message of practical encouragement as the one I have received from you. They will want to know where to turn, what to do to get started in life. You can tell them because you have helped to solve the problems of so many people. There are thousands of people in America today and worldwide who would like to know how they can convert ideas into value, into money. People who must start at a scratch without finances and recoup their losses. If anyone can help them, you can. If you publish the book, I would like to own the first copy that comes from the press, personally autographed by you, with best wishes, believe me. Cordially yours, Jennings Randolph. 35 years later, after I made that speech, it was my pleasure to return to Salem College in 1957 and deliver the baccalaureate. I do not know that word. Baccalaureate. Something laureate sermon. At that time, I received an honorary doctorate of literature degree from the Salem College. Since that time in 1922, I've watched Jennings Randolph rise to become one of the nation's leading airlines executives, a great inspirational speaker, and a United States Senator from West Virginia. Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Which prefaces the start of chapter 2. Desire, the starting point of all achievement and the first step towards riches. Whatever the mind of humanity can conceive and believe, it can achieve. We'll start chapter 2 next time. But I just want to reread one sentence we just went over in this last something. As a general rule, I think we should maintain a spirit of open-mindedness. And remember, as we read, particularly spiritual things as well as this thing here, that these truths that we can kind of lean on as vehicles that will carry us different places, they're not the invention of any one man or any one person. They're a great net of principles, and for us to allow ourselves to kind of hook up to that net, to surf the web, we need to maintain a spirit of open-mindedness. And if we've got that impossibility kind of mentality, we need to be open enough to think that maybe impossible was something that we learnt that is not even true. Impossible is just a word. All words are just words. What's the reality, really? Thanks for learning. thanks for being here. That was the chapter Thoughts Are Things from Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Love you guys so much. Thank you for learning with me. See you soon.